Hello, my name is Frank Corr and you're welcome to Corr's Corner, a new series of interviews with leaders in the hospitality and tourism industry, which is brought to you by hospitalityenews.com. My guest this morning is Niall Gibbons, who is the Chief Executive of Tourism Ireland and who is soon about to move on to new challenges. You're very welcome indeed, Niall.
Good morning, Frank. Great to have you here.
Good morning and thank you for joining us. You came into Tourism Ireland, but not from a tourism background.
I accidentally fell into tourism. I went up to school up the road here, went to college down the road here in Trinity, and I was a chartered accountant in what used to be Coopers in Lyburn before it became PwC. And then I fell into a role in Marine Research and Development. A new state agency called the Marine Institute was established in the early 1990s. And I went in there as financial controller and eventually as head of corporate services. And that organisation, I was involved in the decentralisation of that to Galway, and it personally didn't suit me at the time. But a similar role came up in Tourism Ireland just when it was established in 2000 as Director of Corporate Services, and I threw my hat in the ring, and the rest is history.
It is indeed. Did you know much about tourism? What was your view of tourism before you came into the industry?
I wouldn't have known the facts, the figures, the size of the industry, but like everybody in Ireland, we all had a view on tourism because we all take holidays and we're all good conversationalists. So I would have had views, but nothing like the depth of knowledge that I have now. But I mean, I was happy to come into it. I was a person that could get on with people. I think you have to have that to get on in tourism. But I did bring my knowledge in government affairs, in also the private sector, and that mix of knowledge to be able to, I think, assimilate fairly well. And within Tourism Ireland as well coming in, there was a new dimension to this in that it was a cross-border agency just established after the Good Friday Agreement. So my first day on the job was down in the Labour Relations Commission, involved in the integration of staff of Bord Fáilte and the Northern Ireland Tourism into what was going to become the new organisation.
Yeah, well, 21 years with the organisation now and 14 years as Chief Executive. How has the tourism product evolved over that particular period? I presume it's a lot different now from what it was when you joined 21 years ago.
There's been so many changes. I mean, when you think we'd go around regional roadshows around the time, the big issues were signposting and litter. Cost of living was still there back then as well. But some of the functional things have improved beyond belief. I mean, if you even think about getting around Ireland, the motorway network that's there now is second to none. I think technology has changed beyond all belief. None of us knew what iPhones were. None of us knew about social media. You're out producing brochures, attending shows. It was very much face-to-face. I think the range of experiences that are out there have dramatically changed. You look at Northern Ireland has undergone an amazing renaissance. So products like the Guinness Storehouse was only opening 21 years ago. Titanic Belfast was 10 years away. Experiences like the Wild Atlantic Way were there in feature, so to speak. The road was there, but the concept wasn't. Ireland's Ancient East, Ireland's Hidden Heartlands. So all these new innovations have come in over the last 20 years against the backdrop of some major challenges that we've had as well. But I suppose above all, despite all those changes, we're still a people business.
Yeah.
And despite the changes in technology, what people love about coming to Ireland is the people. That's what really underpins the experience of the destination.
I think that strikes me as it's easier now to get into the real Ireland with particularly the greenways, opening up forests, more walks, more bicycle or cycling paths and that sort of a thing. It's easier to get in touch with the country now, I think, than it was, 2 decades ago.
I think Irish people themselves are far more in touch with the range of things that there are to see and do. I think we're a far more outdoor nation than we would have been 21 years ago. And because we're doing that then, I think overseas people have become more adventurous as well. And if it works for the locals, it'll work for the tourists. And I think there's more investment coming down the track in this whole space. I mean, the idea of the Greenway a number of years ago in Mayo, we thought was a huge adventure. But now we're Waterford, we're Limerick, we're Dublin, Mullingar. There's lots more coming down the track. And I think that really augurs well for the future for Irish tourism.
Yeah. Has the perception of our visitors changed? I mean, their perception of Ireland. It was always traditionally, we have wonderful scenery, we have a terrific heritage and culture, and we have very friendly people. Are they still the big main reasons, or have there been new reasons added?
They're still the cornerstones, there's no question about it. I mean, we've been involved in research over the last 20 years, and there are certain aspects that don't change a whole amount. I mean, the bottom line is that, as you said, scenery and landscape, we're seeing that in the Banshees of Innichiran. The dramatic backdrop for Ireland is always a winner. I think Irish culture And how that gets expressed, obviously, it can be very different in its form. That could be river dance, it can be poetry, it can be literature. So anniversaries of the likes of Ulysses, these things aren't new to us. We've been doing them for years. But above all, the friendliness and warmth of the people is really, really key. And it was summed up well, actually, in a sentence. I think it might have been Francis Brennan who said it. Compared to a destination like the United States, which is very good at tourism as well, the conversation often starts when the person gets out of the elevator, when the bellboy says, "Have a nice day." With Ireland, the conversation starts when you get into the elevator with, "How are you? Where are you from? Why are you here? How long are you staying?
Which one of the
What are you
Gibbons
going to
are
do?"
Yeah.
But that's the difference. I think people feel engaged, there's natural curiosity, and people love that conversation.
Yeah, and those values have always been there, and I think have been enhanced in recent years. But it hasn't been an easy ride. Over that period, we've had so many crises that have affected tourism. I'm thinking shortly after you joined the organisation shortly after 9/11. Then, we've had SARS, we've had terrorism, we've had Brexit, we've had the economic collapse in 2008, and more recently now COVID. But every time, tourism has managed to bounce back. So what's the secret?
There's no secret. I mean, look, you mentioned a lot of things there. I mean, just on the back end of foot and mouth of 9/11, they were huge. Because foot and mouth had a devastating effect on the rural economy. People saw the value of tourism, but our nearest market, for example, Great Britain, was really under threat. And with 9/11, our greatest revenue market, North America, was seriously under threat. I think collaboration was the name of the game, and we saw early after those things, Tourism Ireland, Fáilte Ireland, the industry really collaborating together to find how do we find our way through this. And the only way you can do that is working together. You mentioned the global financial crisis, for example, the volcanic ash issue in 2011 as well, when our airspace was shut down completely. COVID, we just never saw the scale of what was going to come. We could see part of it in advance, but not the scale of where it was. And really, when you look at some of the things that were set up around the time of COVID, the Tourism Recovery Task Force, the Aviation Recovery Task Force, the Northern Ireland Tourism Recovery Steering Group, Tourism Ireland was part of all these ministerial initiatives that were set up that really got the agencies and the industry working together. So now as we emerge into the post-COVID years, I think everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet. That makes a big difference.
Had you to do a lot to keep in touch with the industry abroad, with people who bring visitors into Ireland during COVID, because it would have been very easy maybe for a gap to be created and not have people to lose the habit of coming to Ireland?
Well, I think you're right, and this is where technology played its part. I'm so glad we didn't have COVID, let's say 10 years ago, because at least we had our opportunities on Zoom and Teams to remain connected, and that was a key part of what we were doing. During COVID, there were three big things that we said we'd do. First of all, is listen to our customer. So we actually carried out about 10 waves of research in our top 4 markets, and sometimes in as far as our top 10 markets. We interviewed 30,000 people to find out what were they saying, what were they thinking, how would they feel when they emerged from the crisis and the pandemic. And what they were saying to us was a number of things. First of all, they all couldn't wait to get back to international travel. Secondly, they all wanted to visit somewhere closer to home. And the first people that they'd be visiting would be their friends and family, because that's who they were disconnected from. So emotional reconnection was a big theme. So that was the first thing. The second thing then was, how do we get Ireland reconnected with the world? Because 90% of people who come here come by air, 10% come by sea. And how can we work with our airports and airlines to reconnect Ireland? And the good news is that as we head into 2023, in the summer, we'll probably have slightly more air capacity than we had in 2019. So that's really positive. And then the third thing then was about, ensuring that we can keep the buyers and sellers connected. So all the traditional travel shows that we did before COVID, we tried to recreate and replicate and multiply as many of those as we could online as possible. So we kept people connected, and we kept keeping people abreast of what developments were coming down the track, what our customers were saying, what there is to see and do in Ireland, how the project investment was still going on, how the government was still supporting us. And that has been a huge, huge asset for us as we emerge from the pandemic, because a lot of other destinations went dark, as we used the word, but Ireland actually kept the lights on. And we have to say thank you to the government, both here in Ireland and also the Northern Ireland administration, which maintained funding into Tourism Ireland to ensure that we kept the lights on, to keep people dreaming about Ireland so they could come someday.
Yeah, and did that by and large work? Were people prepared to engage with you, on Zoom or electronically or on the internet?
We saw a phenomenal interest in Ireland. I mean, any of the The new creative that we put up online was watched by far more people than before. People were at home, remember. They were looking for things to dream about. What would they do afterwards? And Ireland was a destination they found they could dream about. And then in relation to the Zoom and the Teams conversations, it meant it was easy to get information about when Ireland was reopening, what there would be to see and do. I mean, at the time when Ireland reopened, first of all, there was obviously just the whole concept of what's it going to look like, what's it going to feel like, what measures were being taken to keep people safe. Now we've started to move beyond that. So all these communication tools were really important because things were changing slowly and incrementally, and people had to be kept informed, and that's where technology was great. And fingers crossed as we head into 23, I mean, we saw a very strong return last year in 22, about 75% of 2019 business. I'm fairly confident now we'll see at least 80% plus.
Very, very good. You mentioned Northern Ireland a few times, and Tourism Ireland is charged with the responsibility of marketing the island of Ireland. It just occurs to me, is that a very difficult proposition in that you have a single destination with two different regimes, two different tax systems, two different currencies, different licensing laws, a whole lot of differences, and yet you're trying to market that as a single destination.
Yeah, I think there's two dimensions to it. There's the customer dimension, who are looking for an experience, don't really recognise borders. What is there to see and do? And I think by having the whole of the island of Ireland together, it means that they get a much bigger portfolio. There's more in the shop window that's going to attract people. It's much better to have the Guinness Storehouse and Titanic Belfast in the one shop window. Much better to have Shane Lowry and Rory McIlroy playing on the same team than playing against each other. And I think, while all regions in Ireland are competing for a bit of business, that's okay. But when it comes to going out to the likes of North America, to China, to Britain, to Australia, we're all really on the same field. And I think that's been one of the great benefits of Tourism Ireland. It's put more experiences in the shop window for the customer. It's made it more appealing, more alluring, and it's one of the great success stories from the Good Friday Agreement. I mean, on the institutional side, we had to merge in the existing structures of Bord Fáilte and the Northern Ireland Tourist Board, and that worked really, really well. We have two ministers, we've got two year ends, we've got two currencies, but the customer doesn't need to see that. I mean, the bottom line is that we've had plans signed off every year. I've worked with 12 different ministers in the last 13 years, 6 from Northern Ireland, 6 from down here, and all our plans have by and large got signed off. And everyone's looking for their bit of business, so to speak, and that's fine. But from a customer's perspective, it's actually getting the message across about all the great things that there are to see and do.
Do visitors in those, particularly further destinations, see Ireland as a single destination, single Ireland, or do they see it as, to the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland?
I think it's fair to say the further you go, the less people are aware of the politics, really.
Yeah.
And even in Great Britain, when we do research as well, it's one of the challenges that we have is that people will be aware of maybe Dublin and Belfast, but they won't be able to get into the geography and the history of the island of Ireland. I mean, that's too difficult. When you go into Germany, for example, we have what we call the Green Haze. People love the idea of coming to Ireland and would love to travel someday, but our job is to convince them that there's enough to do for a 7-day holiday. And when you get out to the likes of China, I'm afraid you'll find that a lot of people haven't heard of the destination at all, and you're trying to get in with a blank canvas to really tell them about this new destination that's beside the UK. We have a joint visa scheme, and obviously China is only reopening, so that's going to take a bit of time. But we did a lot of work in these emerging markets, as we call them, over the last decade, and that will still stand to us when things fully reopen.
In Tourism Ireland, yes. You're a relatively small organisation, 150 people operating in 23 markets. Do you need to be very light on your feet in that you're competing presumably with much better endowed competitors?
Yeah, it's a fair point. You need to be nimble and you need to be agile, no question about it, because markets ebb and flow. But by and large, we're very clear in relation to what we're trying to do. We have a brand strategy that's there. We have a presence in over 20 markets around the globe. Great Britain, North America, France, Germany are the top 4. They're producing about 75% of our business. There's a second tier then, mainly in mainland Europe, the likes of Spain, Italy, Netherlands, Nordics, and then add on to that Australia and Canada. They're tier 2. And tier 3 are those longer haul markets I mentioned, like China and UAE a while ago. And they're a small bit of the business, but they're becoming increasingly important as we look down into the long term. So I think the bottom line is that, we do need to be flexible, and we need to be agile, and we have have people that move from market to market, and we have to flex our strategy from time to time. But that's, you know, part of our planning process. We're always looking ahead, you know, how are consumers changing? What are the economic trends in our main markets? For example, when Brexit came in, we had to look at making adjustments in Great Britain for, you know, the changing consumer landscape and that. And that's part of the challenge of tourism, is changing all the time.
It seems you've had some very innovative successes. I mean, I'm thinking of the greening, which is a phenomenal promotion right around the world. And also the links in with Star Wars and Game of Thrones and things that are to me, seem quite innovative and creative.
Yeah, I think you're right. They're two good examples. The global greening started off in 2010 with Tourism Ireland, and that was our office in Australia, and they made an approach to the authorities in Sydney. It was the 200th anniversary of the first reception for Irish expats in New South Wales by the then Governor Lachlan Macquarie, and they asked would the authorities light up the Sydney Opera House green in that honour. And they did, and it was a very emotive picture any time I showed it in Ireland, because that was actually a very low point in our history with the global financial crisis. And what happened was that people felt that another country is prepared to do that for us. And we just decided to take it from there. We said, let's approach the London Eye and the Empire State Building. And we found that some places already did it, but there were many, many others that really got on the bandwagon. And by 2019, we had 773 sites in about 75 countries. And the value here was the free publicity that we got from it.
Right.
And it meant that this was in newspapers. I mean, in all the Great Britain newspapers, these were covered on the websites and in print. Across the States, for example, in NBC, they did a 30-minute segment on their news on St. Patrick's Day. That would cost over $3 million to buy an ad of 30 seconds. So we got huge publicity and huge momentum from it, and it was a terrific project. On the screen tourism side, I mean, Star Wars, Game of Thrones meant we had the biggest shot on the biggest film on the small screen and the big screen. But I think what's really encouraging is that we were wondering what would come after that. And here we are sitting today with the Banshees of Inisherin, having won 4 BAFTAs. It's gone on to get quite a number of Academy Awards, Colleen Kuhn an Academy Award as well. And the Irish really have hit big. And these are great pluses for us. I mean, the Banshees already, a little 2-minute video that we've produced has had 10.5 million full views for the full 2 minutes. And we're going out now with an extra promotion around that on St. Patrick's Day.
And can you do all of this without actually investing in films and that? I mean, can you, if you like, exploit the success of the films?
I think it's working with partners. It's great to have someone else who can be an advocate for your destination. So, for example, with Banshees, we worked with the team behind the scenes to produce a 2-minute movie, which the actors and producers all contributed to, you know, focusing on things like the landscape and the character of the destination. And that's worked really, really well for us. And I think there's an awful lot we can do. And what we're finding now is that people are getting in with us at a much earlier stage. For example, with Sally Rooney's Normal People, Conversations with Friends, we were able to produce lovely pieces about Dublin, Sligo and those ones. And there's a couple of other things coming down the tracks as well, Vikings, Valhalla. So a good pipeline of business given all the content that's been filmed. And I think we've got some good mileage to come in that space.
Yeah. I just saw somewhere that Ireland is ranked third of 140 countries in terms of tourism marketing and brand effectiveness. I mean, that's quite an achievement, really.
It's a great accolade to get. The World Economic Forum in Davos produces this report every 2 years. It's the Tourism and Travel Competitiveness Report, where they look at approximately 140 destinations and they rank them across a whole range of characteristics. And yeah, we've gone up from the rank of 11 about 10 years ago up to 9 to 5 to 3. So we're going up, which is always a good thing as well. But to get 3 in the world out of all those competitive destinations is a great accolade, and I think it's a tribute to the team here in Tourism Ireland that's produced all this great innovative marketing.
Is your social media activity a big factor in that? I mean, you have 33 international websites, you're out there in 12 languages, millions of hits and viewers every year. Is that a big factor in your
It's a huge
marketing?
channel for us, huge channel for us. I mean, to give you an example, I remember a proposal coming to our board in 2009. At the time, we had 159,000 Facebook fans, and we were advocating additional investment in the area. And people were sceptical and questioning, where is all this going? But we have 6 million Facebook fans today. They have an average of 220 friends each, which means that if they all liked and shared one thing, we reach an audience of over 1.2 billion people. So you add on to that all the work that we're doing on Twitter, Instagram, and other channels, YouTube, etc. It's a very powerful platform. I mean, Facebook is by far and away the biggest, but all the others add a lot of allure to it as well.
And you're not averse to becoming a bit involved yourself on Facebook and Instagram?
Well, I found I started on those channels back around 2010-11 because I found that if you want to talk the language of those things, you have to know a little bit about them. So I made a few mistakes along the way, but I find it's just a habit of getting into sharing the story. And what I found in tourism was that I'm away a lot, but there is a lot of work that we're doing in Tourism Ireland that's very easy to tell on these channels, because all you need to be able to write is 4 or 5 sentences. Here I am, here's what's happening. And by replicating that every day, you do create a personal brand for yourself as well then.
Yeah, excellent. Tourism has, it has bounced back nearly once again, and the omens are quite good at the moment. But what do you see as the main challenges now facing the industry?
The challenges are almost the opposite of what they were 3 years ago. We had no international demand then. We had a lot of supply and industry very worried. So what we're seeing now is international demand coming back much stronger than we thought. If we had been here this time last year, I would have predicted maybe 2/3 of 2019 business recovering. It's about 75% in 2022. This year, I think we'll be comfortably over 80%, maybe up to 85 or more. Air capacity is up at over 100%. We have issues now knocking around like the cost of living crisis. We've got an influx of people seeking international protection, really, mainly from the war in Ukraine. That's caused a supply side issue for us. Lack of availability of cars for hire. And these aren't things that can be solved overnight, and I think we need patience to some extent. This is just going to take time, because you can't switch off the engine from 100 miles an hour to 0 and expect it to go back up to 100. So, I mean, there is a rebuild coming on international tourism, which is good. There is more supply going to come down the track. But there's some very good investment still going on in experience development through our colleagues in Fáilte Ireland. And I think the overall impression of Ireland through the research that we're conducting is still very positive. And that's very good in the context of converting business for the long term.
Could we find a situation, though, in maybe this year or next year, where it will be difficult to find accommodation for visitors who are attracting Ireland, or it will become very expensive?
Well, that happened in 2022, and I think it's going to be a pinch point at certain times in 2023. I mean, the summer season is going to be very busy this year. So I think from our perspective, what we're trying to do in Tourism Ireland is focus as much as we can on value-added tourists. And by definition, they are tourists who are, more likely to stay longer, spend more, visit the regions, and visit in the off-peak, particularly Q1 and Q4.
It also seems to me that while tourism is very effective and a wonderful industry and very attractive, it doesn't seem to be high on people's choice in choosing a career. And I was often wondering why that is.
I think there's a lot of choice out there at the moment, and your entry level into tourism hasn't always been the highest paid. So I think our colleagues in Fáilte Ireland have been working very hard on that to create a far more desirable industry, working with transition year students, working with second and third level institutions, and that's a long-term build. Our colleagues in the IDA have done a great job in bringing in inward investment, and we've got a lot of top tech companies here with their European headquarters. But I think as an indigenous industry, I think this is an industry that is here for the long haul, and I think the careers are going to become much more attractive over the long term in tourism.
It would be nice to see that. It's obviously a problem that's been in the industry for a long time and seems to be ongoing. In your own case, after 21 years, what have been the big rewards of the job?
I think there's no greater honour that you can have than being appointed to represent your country abroad and to promote it and market it in so many destinations. And I've been lucky to be able to travel the world, meet a lot of interesting people, do a lot of interesting things, but above all to tell the story of Ireland, work with a great team here in doing that. And I think when you see the economic rewards coming, that's really, really good. So despite all the challenges that we talked about earlier on, things like the global financial crisis, like COVID, we have seen amazing times, particularly, I would say, from about 2013, when VAT had been reduced, the air travel tax was abolished, the gathering was introduced as a stimulus. A lot of money didn't go into that, by the way, but it was the idea of getting the community on board in tourism. And we saw the most amazing renaissance in tourism growth over that period of 2013 to 19, a huge job creation. And when you see the impact that your organisation has on the economy, it's very fulfilling.
Yeah. In a role like yours, I presume over the years, it's almost all consuming. And is it very difficult to get a work-life balance in that kind of situation?
It's all consuming because it's 24/7
Yeah.
around the globe, but you have to try and carve out a bit of space for yourself, and hopefully I've managed to do that, and maybe I'll do that better in the next life. But I think with tourism, though, it's a very upbeat industry, and that is one of the pluses of it, that while you're in the all-consuming job all the time, you're meeting people that are well disposed towards the destination. They want to come, they want to know more about it. So it's a very positive conversation that you're having, and that helps a lot.
Yeah, well, you've been ranked the most influential Irish CEO on LinkedIn for 2 years, so a lot must be going right. And we hope that a lot goes right for you in the next phase of your career as well. And thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for coming in, Frank. Appreciate it.